It started, as most nightmares do, with a sound. Not a bang, not a scream, but something far more insidious. A whisper. It was my whisper, I swear. My voice soft and hoarse from hours of patrolling the cavernous, silent mall, saying my own name. Alex, it breathed, so close I felt a phantom brush of air against my ear. Yet I was utterly alone in the security office. The only light came from the bank of monitors, each displaying a static, unmoving quadrant of the sleeping mall. A cold dread, sharp and invasive, pierced through the usual dull ache of my night shift. My hand, clammy, went to the ancient desk phone, a relic of a bygone era that looked more like a prop from a forgotten horror film than a functional piece of equipment. It hadn't rung. It couldn't have. No one ever called this line. But then, why did the receiver feel warm, as if it had just been held? I'd taken the night guard job at the old Westbrook Mall out of desperation, a last-ditch effort to outrun the gnawing silence of my own apartment. My name is Alex Thorne, and for the past year, I'd been living in a kind of self-imposed exile, haunted by a past I couldn't outrun. After Sarah, the quiet became a monster. The mall, with its hollow echoes and perpetual twilight, offered a different kind of emptiness, one I hoped would numb the personal void. I was good at being invisible, at fading into the background, and that's what this job required. A solitary figure, a phantom, in the labyrinthine corridors of forgotten retail. But tonight, I wasn't just a phantom. I was hunted. My breath hitched. The whisper came again, clearer this time, an almost playful lilt in its phantom utterance of my name. Alex, come out and play. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the oppressive silence. I scanned the monitors, my eyes darting from the vacant food court to the darkened clothing stores, from the empty escalators to the hushed corridors. Nothing. Just the eerie stillness of a place designed for crowds, now barren and watchful. The flickering fluorescent light in the corner of the office buzzed, a sickly yellow pulse that mirrored the throb behind my eyes. A faint, sweet scent like dried roses and something else, something metallic, drifted through the stale air. A bead of sweat trickled down my temple, cold and clammy. This wasn't just fatigue. This wasn't the usual mind games the night shift played on you, turning shadows into monsters. This was real. The voice was real. But how and who? Every fiber of my being screamed at me to run, to bolt from this tomb of a building and never look back. But a strange, morbid curiosity, a twisted fascination born from weeks of soul-crushing boredom, held me rooted. Or maybe it was just the sheer terror, rendering my limbs useless. I remembered the rules, scrawled on a faded piece of paper taped to the console by the previous guard, a man named Miller who'd vanished without a trace 3 months ago. Rule number 1, never acknowledge anything unusual. Rule number 2, never leave your post between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. Rule number 3, the cameras lie. I'd scoffed at them, dismissed them as the ramblings of an old man driven mad by solitude. Now Miller's crude handwriting seemed to shimmer in the low light, a dire warning from beyond. A sudden sharp drop in temperature made my teeth chatter despite the stagnant air. The clock on the wall, its hands stuck at 2:07 a.m. for as long as I'd worked here, seemed to mock me. It was past 2 a.m. The no-go zone. A chill, deeper than the usual ambient cold of the mall, seeped into my bones. The air grew heavy, thick, with an unseen presence. I felt watched, not just by the cameras, but by something else. Something that breathed the same stale air as me, something that was here. My eyes were glued to monitor 7, a feed from the defunct toy store. For a fleeting second, a shadow, impossibly deep, seemed to detach itself from the gloom near a stack of dusty boxes. It wasn't the play of light or a camera glitch. It moved with a fluid, unnatural grace, coalescing into a vaguely human shape before dissolving back into the darkness. A sharp intake of breath. My imagination, I tried to tell myself. Just my tired, frayed mind playing tricks. But the tremor in my hands was real. The metallic taste of fear on my tongue was real. Then a sound from outside the office. A soft, rhythmic scraping, like fingernails dragging across concrete. It grew louder, moving down the corridor that led to the food court. A corridor I just checked 10 minutes ago. A corridor I knew to be utterly empty. My heart leapt into my throat. Every instinct screamed. This wasn't just a whisper anymore. This was something tangible, something approaching. The door to my office, heavy and steel, suddenly felt flimsy. A thin barrier against the encroaching dread. I swallowed, my throat dry and constricted. My hand hovered over the panic button, but I froze. What if pressing it only made things worse? What if it called them? The scraping stopped just outside my door. The silence that followed was deafening, suffocating. I held my breath, listening, straining, my ears ringing with the intensity of my terror. What was out there? And what did it want? A faint scratching began on the other side of the steel door, rhythmic and deliberate, like someone or something was trying to claw its way in. The scratching on the door persisted for what felt like an eternity, a slow, methodical rasp that grated on my nerves. Then, as abruptly as it began, it ceased, leaving behind a silence so profound it felt like a physical weight pressing down on me. I stood frozen, my breath held captive in my lungs, my gaze fixed on the reinforced steel door. My mind, usually a chaotic whirlwind of anxieties, was terrifyingly clear, focused on every creak of the old building, every distant hum of the ventilation system. The air in the office, always cool, now felt frigid. A damp cold that seeped into my bones, a kind of cold that had no logical source. It was the same cold I'd felt that night, Sarah. The night the car went silent and my life fractured. I shook my head, trying to dislodge the memory, but it clung to me like a shroud. Sarah had loved malls, loved the bustling energy, the bright lights. She'd always said they were places of life. Now this one felt like a mausoleum. My personal vulnerabilities, the gaping maw of grief and guilt that had swallowed me whole after her accident, were exposed here in the echoing silence of the night. This job, meant to be a refuge, was becoming a mirror, reflecting my deepest fears back at me. I forced myself to move, to break the paralyzing spell. I checked the monitors again, a slow, methodical sweep. Still nothing. The cameras showed static, unmoving scenes, but Miller's rule echoed in my head. The cameras lie. I dismissed it as paranoid nonsense. Now the phrase seemed to carry a sinister weight. What if they didn't just malfunction? What if they actively obscured something? And why did I suddenly feel an itch, a crawling sensation on the back of my neck, as if I were being watched from within the very lens of the camera? My personal demons weren't helping. Sarah's last words, whispered arguments that ended in slammed doors and screeching tires, replayed in my mind. The endless loop of what if haunted my waking hours, and now it seemed to be bleeding into this place. Was this some twisted manifestation of my guilt? Was I finally losing my mind in the desolate quiet of Westbrook Mall? Days before, little things had started. A fleeting shadow in my peripheral vision as I rounded a corner. gone when I turned my head. The distant sound of children laughing from the long-shuttered arcade. I'd attributed them to exhaustion, to the mind playing tricks on a man starved for sleep and companionship. But then, there were the watches. Every single clock and watch. In the jewelry store, all 23 of them had stopped at precisely 2:07 a.m., the exact time the ancient clock in my security office had seized up months ago. I'd laughed it off as a bizarre coincidence, a power surge maybe. But after the whisper, after the scraping at my door, it no longer felt like a coincidence. It felt like a signal. A chill ran through me as I remembered a chilling detail. The car accident that took Sarah happened at precisely 2:07 a.m. I remember finding one of the mannequins in the women's clothing store, the one with the vacant painted smile, turned to face the security camera directly. Its head was tilted, as if in silent judgment. I'd shrugged it off, assuming a prank by the cleaning crew, but I hadn't seen any cleaning crew for weeks. And yesterday the air in the food court had been heavy with the scent of stale popcorn and hot dogs, a smell that should have long since dissipated from a place that hadn't served food in years. These weren't just random oddities. They were deliberate, unsettling breadcrumbs, leading me down a path I didn't want to follow. The only other person I ever saw was old Mr. Henderson, the janitor who worked the day shift. He was a quiet man, always hunched over his mop bucket, muttering to himself. I'd never paid him much mind. But last week, I'd caught him staring at me from across the deserted food court, his eyes wide and unblinking, a strange, knowing look in them. When he saw I'd noticed him, he'd quickly averted his gaze, almost scuttling away. It was a brief, unsettling encounter, and for the first time, I felt a tremor of distrust towards him. What did he know? Why had he looked at me like that? Did his silence hide a secret? Or was it a warning I wasn't ready to hear? The silence returned, but it was a different kind of silence now. Not empty, but expectant. The air thrummed with an unseen energy, a palpable tension that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. I glanced at the monitors again, my gaze lingering on the darkened corridors. The silence didn't last. It shattered with a low, guttural growl that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the mall. It wasn't animalistic, not quite. It was more akin to a distorted, magnified human voice, struggling to form words, laced with an ancient, unbearable pain. The sound clawed at my ears, vibrating through the floor, through my very bones. This was no trick of the mind, no overactive imagination. This was real. And with the growl came a faint, sickeningly sweet stench, like decay masked by cheap perfume. My disoriented gaze darted to the monitors. On screen 3, the camera feed from the main entrance atrium, the grand hall that usually lay in perpetual gloom, was suddenly bathed in a sickly green light. It pulsed, a slow, hypnotic beat, revealing the towering mannequins from the abandoned department store, now silhouetted like sentinels in a forgotten tomb. And then, one of them moved. It wasn't a fall or a tilt. It was a deliberate, agonizingly slow turn of its head, its featureless face swiveling to directly face the camera. The growl intensified, becoming a ragged, wet gasp, as if something gargantuan was struggling to breathe. The line between real and unreal blurred with terrifying speed. The mannequin's head continued to turn, past the camera's view, as if looking directly at me, sitting in the security office, miles away. A faint, metallic scraping accompanied its movement like bone dragging on concrete. Then the static on the screen intensified, a blizzard of white noise. For a split second through the digital snow, I saw it. a reflection, not of the atrium, not of the mannequins, but of my own security office. And in that reflection, standing directly behind me, was a tall, emaciated figure, its limbs impossibly long, its head tilted at an unnatural angle, its eyes, two pinpricks of pure, malevolent red, burned from the screen, its mouth, a gaping black void, seemed to stretch impossibly wide, as if silently screaming. A scream tore from my throat, a raw, primal sound of absolute terror. I scrambled backwards, chair skittering across the floor, my eyes locked on the monitor. Even as my body tried to flee, the figure in the reflection was raising a hand, a clawed, skeletal thing, not towards the reflection of me, but towards the camera itself, towards my camera. And as it did, a new sound filled the office, a cacophony of whispers, thousands of voices hissing my name, merging into a sickening, deafening roar. The lights in the office flickered violently, strobing the room in a dizzying display. Each flash revealed the reflection behind me, closer each time, more distinct, its movements jerky and unnatural, like a broken automaton. My breath hitched. This was it. This was what Miller had warned about. This was the entity that haunted Westbrook Mall. I squeezed my eyes shut, pressing my hands against my ears, desperate to block out the horrific symphony of voices, the image of those burning red eyes. But the sounds penetrated, burrowing into my brain, and the image was burned onto my eyelids. When I finally dared to open my eyes, the monitor was clear again, showing the silent, green-lit atrium. The mannequin was still, its head facing forward. The reflection was gone. The whispers had ceased. The only sound was my own ragged, desperate gasps for air. The horror was far from over. As my gaze swept across the other monitors, I saw them. All of them. In every single camera feed, in every dark corner of the mall, there were eyes. Dozens, hundreds of pinpricks of red light, glowing from the shadows, watching. They belonged to the mannequins, to the dusty display models, to the forgotten toys. All of them, their vacant plastic eyes now alight with a malevolent, living glow. They weren't just watching the camera, they were watching me. And in the center of each glowing red eye, a tiny, almost imperceptible symbol seemed to flicker, a symbol I'd seen before, etched into Sarah's favorite locket. And then, on monitor 7, the defunct toy store, the one where I'd seen the shadow earlier. A tiny porcelain doll, propped up on a shelf, its painted smile fixed and eerie, began to cry. Not just a sound effect from the camera, but a genuine, heartbreaking sob that filled the speakers, magnified and distorted. The doll's head tilted, its painted eyes now glowing red, filled with tears that streamed down its blank face. A single, raspy word escaped its tiny porcelain lips, echoing in the speakers like a death knell. Mine. I stared, transfixed, my blood running cold. This was not a dream. This was not a hallucination. This was real. And whatever it was not just here. It was inside the mall. It was inside everything. Was it a curse? Was it madness? Or was it something far older, far more terrible, that had awakened in this forgotten place? The doll's single word, mine, resonated in my mind. A terrifying claim. I was trapped. And I was not alone. The doll's chilling declaration, mine, echoed in the dead air of the security office. A pronouncement that burrowed deep into my psyche and twisted itself around my very being. The red eyes on the monitors winked out, one by one, leaving the screens in their usual static gloom. The green light in the atrium faded, replaced by the familiar oppressive darkness. The silence returned, but it was no longer the empty, vast silence of an abandoned mall. It was a predatory silence, thick with a malevolent presence that had revealed itself, then retreated, leaving me to stew in its aftermath. The air still tasted faintly of roses and iron, a lingering testament to the impossible. I survived the night, though I don't remember much of the remaining hours. They passed in a blur of hypervigilance and numbing terror. Every creak of the old building sent shivers down my spine. Every distant hum of machinery became a phantom whisper. When the first weak rays of dawn finally filtered through the grimy windows of the office, painting the monitors in a sickly gray light, I felt no relief, only a profound, pervasive weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. I stumbled out of the mall that morning, the taste of ash in my mouth, my limbs heavy with a dread that had seeped into my bones. The outside world bustling with early morning commuters and the chirping of birds felt alien, distant. How could life be so normal when my world had been so irrevocably fractured just hours before? I didn't quit immediately. Something held me back. A morbid fascination, perhaps, or a desperate need to understand what had happened. I returned the next night and the next, each shift an agonizing descent into psychological torment. The whispers were less frequent, the red eyes only appeared as fleeting glimpses, but the subtle, insidious changes continued. Mannequins would be subtly rearranged. Items in stores would be moved. Sometimes I'd catch a faint reflection in a darkened window, not of myself, but of a gaunt, shadowy figure, always just at the edge of my vision, always gone when I turned to face it. And always, faintly, the scent of roses. Sarah's favorite scent. The final twist came 3 weeks later. I was doing my usual rounds, my flashlight beam cutting through the gloom of the old electronics store, a place I usually avoided because of the unsettling rows of blank television screens. As I swept the light across a dusty display of ancient VCRs, I saw it, taped to the screen of one of them, a faded, yellowed photograph. It was a picture of a man, old Miller, the previous night guard. He looked gaunt, his eyes wide with an almost manic terror, a look I now recognized as my own. And in his hand, clutched tightly, was a small porcelain doll, the same doll from the toy store. Behind him, just visible in the grainy photo, was a single, flickering, fluorescent light, exactly like the one in my office. My breath hitched. My flashlight beam trembled. On the back of the photo, scrawled in faint, shaky handwriting, were 3 words. It took Sarah. The world tilted. Sarah, my Sarah, the accident. It wasn't an accident, it was the mall. This entity, it hadn't just appeared. It had been here all along. It hadn't just haunted me, it had hunted me, and it had taken her. My lingering guilt, my self-blame dissolved into a horrifying, all-consuming rage and a deeper, more profound fear. It wasn't just a haunting, it was personal. It had chosen me not just as a victim, but as a replacement. Was this why Miller vanished? Was this why he had left the rules? Not just as warnings, but as a twisted plea for help from whoever came next? I left that night and never returned. I didn't even bother to give notice. The mall stands empty now, a decaying monument to forgotten retail and unspeakable horror. But the horror didn't stay there. It followed me. The psychological scars are deep, unyielding. I see red eyes in every shadow. I hear whispers in every gust of wind. Paranoia is my constant companion. Every mirror, every reflective surface is a source of dread, for fear of what reflection might not be my own. My sleep is a chaotic tapestry of nightmares, always set in the echoing halls of Westbrook Mall, always ending with that chilling whisper of my name, followed by the soft, mournful cry of a porcelain doll. I feel a cursed fate, a lingering connection to that place. a sense that something is still waiting, watching, biding its time. I escaped the physical confines of the mall, but I never truly left its grip. Sometimes I wonder if the mall is still active, still playing its twisted game, and if someone else, like me, is now hearing whispers on a phone they never touched. The silence after I ran from that mall was the loudest sound of all. It wasn't the peace I craved, but a new kind of terror, a profound echo of the horror I'd left behind, now residing within me. I learned that some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed. Some places, once entered, embed themselves in your very soul, and some whispers once heard can never be unheard. My experience at Westbrook Mall taught me a chilling lesson. Sometimes the things we seek to escape are merely stepping stones to a far greater darkness. I went there to outrun my grief, to drown out the silence of my personal trauma. Instead, I found a silence that was far more terrifying, a silence that breathed, that whispered, that claimed. The mall stands empty, a decaying husk, but its tendrils still reach for me. I'm no longer just Alex, the night guard. I'm Alex, the one who saw, the one who heard, the one who knows. And the hardest truth of all, what happened to me, what happened to Sarah, was not a random act. It was a choice. My choice to step into that silence, to ignore the rules, to tempt the unknown. I still see the flickering lights in my peripheral vision, even in broad daylight. I still feel the unnatural cold in empty rooms. And sometimes, when the wind howls just right, I swear I can hear it. A faint, distant whisper, barely audible, just my name, followed by a tiny porcelain sob. It's a reminder that some stories don't end when you close the book. They just pause, waiting for the next dark chapter to unfold. And sometimes the monster isn't just in the shadows. It's waiting for you to invite it in. The mall didn't just take Sarah, it took a piece of me, and I can still feel it. A cold porcelain hand clutching my heart.